2009, and it's very much my honor and privilege to introduce and interview Roland Pulley. Roland, we're going to start out with, who were your parents and what did they do for a living?
Martin Pulley was my father, and he started out farming, and then he went to work for a landscaper in Shenandoah, Iowa. We moved here from Lewis, Iowa. If you know where Lewis is.
Sure.
Not many people do. But, and then he went to work for, on his own, taking care of yards. Then he went to work for Henry Field, and then he went to work for Earl May and worked for them till he passed away, really.
Do you know approximately what year he went to work for Henry Field or Earl May, either one, give or take?
Oh, let's see. I was 3 when we moved here.
There you go.
So that would probably have been about when he...
So probably about 28 or 29,
Right.
somewhere in there. And then he worked for a few years for Henry Field,
Mm-hmm.
and then on to Earl May.
Yes.
And then when did your dad get married, and who did he marry?
Well, he got married. I can't tell you the married date, but he married in Lewis.
Mhm.
She was from Lewis also, and her father was a carpenter, and he met her there in Lewis, and they got married there.
Cool.
And there was her and her sister got married the same together, what they used to call that.
A double wedding. And what was her name?
My mom,
Yes.
Sybil Agnes Trent, Trent, and her father was a carpenter in Lewis.
And so did you know your grandparents then? Did you ever know her
I
parents?
just know my grandmother
On which side?
on my dad's side.
And what was her name?
She was a Pont, Mary Pont, and then she married my grandpa, and his name was Edward Pulley, and he, there's kind of a story behind that. I don't know if you want it or
Yes,
not.
please.
The superintendent at Griswold, Iowa, is doing a story on her because she was married, had a baby, lost her husband all in 1 year. So she never remarried, and then she became a midwife for the cousins in her, where she was from a big family, and she delivered babies.
Interesting.
And you know, Terry, I have never, ever heard anybody say that she lost a child by delivering a child. And that seems unusual to me.
For that time, that's a pretty good record.
Yeah, yeah.
She must have been pretty knowledgeable and helpful. Well, cool. Do you know, let's see now, you said your parents came to Shenandoah because of the job. Do you know what brought them to Lewis in the first place? Or what brought them? Is that still in Page County?
No, that's Cass County.
Is that Cass? Do you know what brought them there? Or what brought your grandparents there?
Oh, on my dad's side, why, those people were from England, and they settled in Illinois and then moved to Lewis, and Grandpa Pont raised sheep, and his brother went to Nebraska and lived there, and when Grandpa Pulley died, well then his brother, Grandma's brother, came back
I see.
to Lewis to stay and farm Grandma's farm, which was south of Lewis. I mean, Atlantic, about 7 miles. Of course, I can get into a lot of stories when we talk about that, because the house, the farm, was east of Fletcher Chapel, but nobody knows where Fletcher Chapel is.
I'm afraid I don't.
It was a grocery store set on the corner on 71,
And they called it Fletcher Chapel?
there was a church there, and then,
I see.
And whether Fletcher was a man's name that started the community or what, but that was the gist of.
Sure.
And then they moved from there south of Lewis and lived with Grandma and Grandpa Pont until they lost them.
Well, south of Lewis, there's a nice Iowa State agricultural farm and learning
No,
center.
that's west.
Oh, sorry.
West. That's Armstrong.
Uh-huh.
And
Is
that
it west of Lewis?
west of Atlantic.
Southwest
Okay.
Atlantic.
Well, that's the only reason I've heard of Lewis, I have to be honest.
Oh yeah. Well, Hickman House is at Lewis. That's the old historical house.
Yep, yep.
That's where the slaves were brought up and left there, and then moved them on up.
Do you think your grandparents had anything to do with that, or did they help anybody? Do you know?
No.
So, Roland, when and where were you born?
I was born in Cumberland, and only one of the kids that was born in that little town. My dad was worked for the highway. He had a team, and in those days they had a scoop that they pulled the team with and worked on highways.
I see. And what did the scoop do?
Move the dirt, like you see these big, heavy equipment.
Well, which schools did you attend?
Everything was here in Shenandoah.
So that's right, you told me you moved here, I think, when you were 3.
Mm-hmm.
There you go. So, which schools here in Shenandoah did you go to? Were they in town, or?
No, all mine were in town. I always wanted, Terry, to go to a country school. I thought it would be so neat to be in the country school, but no, I didn't have that choice. So,
Sure.
yeah, at Lowell, and then when they closed that school, then I went up to. I went 1 year at Forest Park. There was a school there, and I went 1 year there, and then 8th grade was in. It was a Catholic school where a Christian church is.
Oh, I see.
Mm-hmm.
And were there quite a few children in your school?
Nah, I don't know. Probably 80 or 90, something like that.
I'd say that's a good amount.
Mm-hmm.
Well, when you were younger, were there any special toys that you had or that you played with? Any special stories about those?
Oh, you had to have a stick horse.
There you go. There you go.
I really always wanted to have a pony. My dad said, we got 5 kids, 2 grown-ups. Where do you think we're going to feed that pony? So I never did have one. Now I find out that my son's daughter, she's 9, she's getting horse-minded.
Uh-oh.
And her mom said, well, I see now why that child done that. That's a Pulley trait.
There you go. That's fun.
Yeah.
Anything else about that? Bicycles or anything special? Do you remember a special birthday? Or how did you celebrate birthdays in your family?
Mom, I didn't like cake, so she always fixed me a pie. Because I like pie.
And any special type of pie or
Apple or peach.
There you go. And I'm sure it was always fresh.
Mom was a good cook.
Was she?
Yeah, she worked at the Elks Club for years. She was a cook there.
So she really was, wasn't
Yeah.
she?
Everybody said she was,
Uh-huh.
but
I'll
I
bet
knew
she-
she was.
Sure, you did you? On a daily basis. Roland, do you remember any special Christmases? And or the kind of food you ate to celebrate
We
Christmas?
always had to have a turkey, but we maybe had to have it was a chicken instead of a turkey.
Well, sure, sure.
Yeah.
Did you have any special Christmas presents that you remember? Or that maybe your sisters or brothers received?
No, I had Mom and Dad bought each one of us boys, there was 3 of us boys, cast iron fire trucks. And I had to have a different one because they didn't want mine to look like the other 2. But I wished I had them now
I'll bet.
because they're very much in demand.
That's a collectible, isn't it now?
Yes.
Yes, yep.
Yep.
And do you remember anything your sisters ever received, or your mom and dad? Did they each
They
get a
were-
present?
They were, I know one of them had toy, all plates and saucers and stuff like that. Because I was the youngest kid, and they were of the boys, and so the sisters would make me sit and play, play dinner with them, you know. So
So I'll bet you do remember those plates and cups and saucers,
Yeah.
and don't you? Do you remember what kind of fun you had as a teenager? What did you do here in Shenandoah?
got to go barefooted,
There you go.
which you don't think kids go barefooted anymore. But Mom wouldn't let me, only in summertime when it was warm, wouldn't let me go in the wintertime. But I don't know.
Did you go to any movies or to the
Yes.
library or anything?
Well, now I can tell you a library story, and this might be in her.
Okay, bring it on.
Let's hear it.
My mom's family were book readers. And I have always said, when I was on the board, the library board, the school board, that kids that I knew that read books and were from a book reading family were better in school than other kids. Now, I'm not just kidding. I'm serious about this. I was in 8th grade. You were like this one. And the teacher asked me, or to ask the class, I want you to, each one of you, read a book and then write a paragraph out of that book. And I said, I am not going to read a book. And she said, well, Roland, you've got to. I've asked you to. I said, but I don't have a book to read.
Sure.
I don't want a book. I read everything I want to read. And she said, well, I'll tell you this. Name one book, a group. I said, well, the only one that I really like is James Fenimore Cooper works. And if you know who James Fenimore Cooper is, probably the greatest American author, I guess, wasn't it?
He's up there with the top.
And I read every one of his works. She said, you give me one paragraph out of one of them books and you'll have an A. So I wrote down, and didn't take me very long. And the reason I liked his works, I believed, like he believed, that Indians could scent odors like dogs do. So I read every one of his books. I can't even name all of them now, but The Last of the Mohicans and all of them.
Good for you.
But
And what grade was this?
Huh?
What grade was this?
This is 8th grade. But I used to walk, the library was where it was then. I used to walk home from school, and that time it was by the Christian church, pick up a book, take it home, read it, and take it back the next day and drop it off at the library.
Oh,
So I read a lot of
so
books.
you can read quite well.
Yeah, but I'm not
for
doing
you.
as much as I used to.
No, but good for you.
And I've always encouraged my grandkids to read books, and I think some of them do a good job of it.
Maybe some of the other traits came through the generations too, besides the horse sense. There you go. Roland, what did you do after high school?
Worked for Earl May.
Mm-hmm. But first, what was your first job? Maybe I should start there. Where was your first job?
I see. Of course, Henry Field,
Mm-hmm.
and I'd done numerous jobs for them. Helped them put out catalogs,
Mm.
and that was up to number one. Henry Field was quite a company. They would name every one of their buildings. Number one, of course, was the main building,
I see.
and number two was down here at the Seed House where I worked, and number three was the other building down there, and number 10 was out where Garden View is. That was their ground, and that was number 10. And I can't name them on it. Number 4 was the empty building up by Earl May at the end of the street.
Huh.
That's the seed, farm
I
seed
see.
building. And that was number 4.
And so how many buildings were there altogether then?
Well, I know there was 10, because
Uh-huh. Have number 10, sure.
Yeah.
And where was number 2 located in,
well, there,
The ones along Ferguson Road, what numbers are those? I can't, I've driven past them so many years and I don't even remember.
I think that would be the ones he's talking about.
that were
The
number,
2 and 3.
Oh, no, those are.
no, this is on Thomas,
oh, on Thomas, there you
where
go.
the bowling alley is.
Oh, I see.
That was the 2 buildings that was behind there that burned.
Oh,
Okay, that was way off on that.
That was number 2 and number 4, number 3. Yeah, I ran a seed packeting machine in that one,
Interesting.
and
Because your job was, or your profession through your life, you would say you were a seedsman?
that's what I've always said I was a seedsman.
Mm-hmm.
See, I was All-American flower and vegetable judge for the United States and Canada.
And where all did that take you?
Oh, a lot of places.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
But many towns and cities throughout the U.S. and Canada.
Yeah. I still catch myself having to judge. I judge for Page County over here at Corinda.
For the fair?
Yes.
Good for you.
Yeah.
Well, are there any stories you'd like to tell us about when you were out of Shenandoah and judging something? Did you ever have a special story you'd like to relay with us about that? Maybe
No.
something in Canada or?
No, there's not really. It's just almost the same thing. It was once a year I had to go to Pennsylvania at the State College, and they had a flower show there, or vegetable show, and all the seedsmen all over the United States and world would come there, and that was always interesting. Because,
Was that sort of the national show in Pennsylvania?
yeah, that was a college.
Are there any flowers or vegetable types that you especially enjoy judging or looking at?
No, I like vegetables better than flowers,
Mm-hmm.
but I do like flowers. I was going to mention one of them I've got blooming at home is 4 o'clock, and they're the darndest plant. They don't, at 4 o'clock almost, they'll close up, and in the morning they're opened up again. They're really in it. I'm going to plant more of them next year.
and they'll reseed themselves too.
Fun. So did you ever think of your landscape? You were quite knowledgeable then when you were planting your own landscape because you'd seen all these plants, flowers, vegetables, all in
Yeah.
bloom, all at their height of their glory.
Mhm.
So vegetables are your favorite.
Oh, there's some of them I can't eat anymore, so they're still my favorite. Tomatoes is a great one, but I'm not supposed to have seeds. And anything with seeds, they tell me I'm not supposed to have.
Yeah.
So,
Darn it, that rules out two of our favorites, doesn't it? Yeah?
yeah. And
Cucumbers.
popcorn, I like my popcorn, but I can't eat popcorn.
Another Earl May product.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I used
Darn
to.
it.
I used to go to the store when they opened the store. I'd go and first thing they'd do is get me to pop popcorn. And I had to watch these little kids and then that's the parent. Do you care if they eat this? 'Cause it's not up to me, it's up to you. No, that's fine. Or, no, you can't have any of that, Bobby.
Well, I was going to say, while you were traveling in Canada and the U.S., did you ever see any signs of the Depression? Do you remember any of that?
No.
Were those years past the Depression when you were traveling?
I didn't, I had never, because I was going to say, if people would plant gardens again, and now I'm pushing the trade,
It's all right.
why, they would find out that it would be helpful. But so many of them don't care to. I was the only one of my brothers and sisters that planted garden, because my dad planted garden. And I tagged him morning, noon, and night. And he was a night man at Henry Fields. And I used to go down and spend the evenings all night with him.
Oh,
And but he liked to
He was
do
a gardener.
Yes, he was.
Yes.
Yeah.
And had a green thumb.
oh yeah, he had one.
Well, I think you've got 10 fingers that are green. So your dad worked for Henry Fields, and then did he always work for Henry Fields?
No, he worked for a man, and I can't think of his name now. I was going to think of it, but I can't. That done landscaping, and that's where he learned a lot of it from them and from him. And then he went to work for Henry Field. And I don't know much about the Henry Field because I was just a kid. But he worked for, like I said, the May family. They classified him as part of the family.
They did.
He always got, his mom and dad would go to Wisconsin up to the summer home and spend a week or 10 days up there.
Oh, how nice.
Yeah.
How nice. And then I think I've heard a story about your dad often giving rides to kids. Do you have a comment or a little bit about that?
Well, Ed May introduced me to his wife up in Omaha one day and was told his wife, this is Roland Pulley, it was Martin, his dad, who used to haul me down to the depot, and I'd get on the train, and then he'd go down to Hamburg and wait for the train to come in and then bring me back. And Ed, I'm talking about Junior, he rode up into the engineer's cab with his engineer's cap on. And he told that, and he said, Grandpa Pulley was the one that hauled me around every place I wanted to go.
Well, and didn't Betty Jane Shaw tell us that she also had rides from your dad?
Oh, yeah.
Yep.
I think every one of them kids.
Yeah. When her dad and her grandpa were busy.
Yeah.
I think your dad gave her rides around town
Yeah.
too. Yeah. Well, your dad was much loved as well as you.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Well, let's see. Did you see any signs of the Depression at all when you were a younger child?
Oh, yeah, I did. Especially at Christmas time when people were buying, and some people didn't have it. I know the Elks Club used to have, when they were uptown, they used to have, give out toys and stuff. Maybe a pair of socks is all it was, but it was something that they had. And then, what do you call that when they come around?
Salvation Army?
Yeah, but we didn't have a Salvation Army, but it would.
A collection type place? Or?
And us kids living where we didn't really have much.
Sure.
And when they would deliver the packages, by the Boy Scouts done it, why we hid, because we didn't want them to see us getting a package. But the minute they walked off the porch, we were in that package.
To see what was in it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And would there be gifts for the children in there?
Oh,
like
yeah.
you say, socks maybe?
Yeah.
Or?
And there'd be food.
Oh, uh-huh.
Yeah.
Uh-huh. And they
There-
took these all around town and delivered them to people who needed a little help at Christmas.
Yep.
Well, and 5 kids and 2 adults, I have to side with your
Well,
dad.
and
That's
then
a lot
lot
to
of
feed.
times at that time of the year, why the nurseries, and I'm blaming the nursery because we had about 5 or 6 of them in town. They let people go, and I had one nurseryman tell me that he didn't mind using the Mexicans when they were working on the field, because he could send them home to Mexico, where the United States people, you didn't feel like you could do that.
You wanted to employ them all year
Right.
long.
So.
Do you remember anything about the weather in the 30s? Were you old enough to remember the snow of 36 or
A lot
the
of
heat?
snow.
Either one?
I remember the porch, we had an east porch on our house, and that snow would come up as high as it'd be as high as that.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, a lot more snow, I think.
And do you remember anything about the heat?
Yeah, and rain. Us kids, where I lived in town here, the nursery had open field behind it, and we used to take a piece of board and set it out in the field and let the wind blow,
Yeah.
and it would blow that dirt so bad you could lean against that board and it would hold up with the dirt. I can remember when Kansas had the
Dust Bowl?
yeah, that turned, you couldn't see the sun maybe for a day or two. And Mom's the only time Mom would let us go out barefooted, pretty much, because we could go out and into the side when it was that hot.
Sure.
But
A lot of dust. Did you remember any effect the Dust Bowl had on the nurseries? You know, did your dad mention anything, or do you remember?
No.
Okay.
Oh, we was worrying about whether it was gonna blow into, because it would blow in the windows and pile up on the sills, windowsill.
Well, do you remember at all Roosevelt's inauguration and how your family reacted to Roosevelt?
No.
Not much said or done or didn't change your lives any?
Now you're talking about Franklin.
I am. Yeah.
No.
Okay. Was there any crime in Shenandoah or Page County when you were growing up?
Not that I could remember.
Mm-hmm.
All I remember is that they'd have to go to Corinda to stay at the jail over there, because we didn't have a
Sure.
county jail.
And you probably would know, your dad being a night watchman and things, and you spending the night out there, there was never much that ever happened.
No.
No?
No, he never carried a gun. He said, if I don't have a gun, then I don't have to worry. But if you have a gun, then you got to protect yourself, and they'll go against you. So Dad never did.
Did you ever meet Earl May?
Just barely.
Mm-hmm.
See, I was younger then.
See, did he die is it 1946?
I believe that's right.
And then you started for Earl May in 44, did you tell me? Okay. So you met him maybe once or twice?
Yes.
Uh-huh. Do you have any recollection of him? Or?
Well, yeah, he'd come through the store, and he always spoke.
Because at that time you worked here at the Shenandoah store?
I worked always at Shenandoah,
Uh-huh.
and I was always at the seed house.
Oh, uh-huh. And so you helped package seeds?
That
Sort?
was my job.
What all did you do with the seeds besides package?
Uh,
Did you say you sorted seeds too?
no,
Just help package them? Mm-hmm. And you remember the volume of seeds you packaged?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was on, on fourth floor
Uh-huh.
and spent all my time up there with the seed packaging machines. And
Do you know how many packages you produce today? Did they ever count?
oh, yeah.
All the time?
Yeah, there's packing slips. Yeah, we had slips that
I see.
told us how many.
But do you remember how many you did?
Oh, you'd have a run of 20,000.
A day?
Yeah, no, that run. You
Oh.
you might do 2 of them a day.
2 runs of 20,000 a day.
Mm-hmm.
And then were most of the seeds you packaged for the mail order catalog? Or were they for the stores and mail order?
Stores and mail. Then we would package for Pioneer Seed Company and other seed companies. We'd do their packaging for them.
Mm-hmm.
I
And-
don't know if they still do that or not.
I don't know anymore.
Do you have any fun stories about when you first worked or at any time you worked for Earl May?
No,
Were you there when they sold chickens and
I
batteries?
sold
and
chickens.
Did you sell chickens?
They would send me after the season
Uh-huh.
was over, the seed season, then they would send me over to the hatchery and I would sell the seeds or deliver them to the people as they came to the door to pick up their chickens.
Uh-huh.
And
where was the chicken hatchery?
oh, it's now an empty building over here across from the post office.
I see.
They call it the Mayway Hatchery,
Oh.
and World Publishing took over the building.
And do you know why they called it the Mayway?
You know, the building downtown had the dock, was a Mayway, and where that ever got started is beyond me. But they always say we'd always collect on the Mayway
Yeah.
in the morning to tell stories and decide what we're going to do that day. But that was,
It would be of interest to find out how that dock especially got
Mhm.
its name, the Mayway.
the chickens, that name was not owned by the family. That name was owned by K.I. Miller. Am I getting it out of line?
No.
That owned, he owned hatcheries in the Midwest. He was from Lancaster, Missouri. And he named, or he took the name, I guess, or whatever. But that was called the Mayway Hatchery. Now, the one in Omaha was K.I. Miller Hatchery. The one in Des Moines was K.I. Miller Hatchery. But this one was the only one, was the Mayway.
And maybe just because of Earl
Well,
May, they went ahead and
Yeah,
used the name, if you will.
yeah, they wanted to collect on that name.
So you packaged seeds, you also sold chickens and passed out seeds, if you will. Were there any other jobs that you had at Earl May?
I eventually, well, I've always said that any time a person would lose, they would retire,
Mhm.
I ended up with their job. So when I was in charge of packaging, and Mrs. Orr was a lady that run the shipping, the mail order department, shipping and mail order, she would retire. Well, then I ended up with that job, and that was on 3rd floor. I'm on 4th floor. And then, let's see, there was who else retired, and then I just
Absorbed that job too.
Yeah. So I think I had 8 budgets that I had to set, and I hated budgets.
Don't we all?
I like to do anything but set a budget.
Uh-huh.
But we had a young guy that took over the accounting, and he always came in, and he said, "Roland, you ready for budgets? I'll help you write it up." He was an accountant,
Uh-huh.
and I didn't like budgets. I didn't like figures.
Then as the years went on, did you get to travel to the stores and help set up new stores and
Hmm
suggest inventory and different things.
Mhm.
Cool.
Yep.
And then after you sold the chickens, I think I asked you, did you get to help sell batteries and jeans and, I mean, didn't they just sell everything in an Earl May store?
Yeah.
You know, back in the 30s and 40s?
I've talked to some of the store managers, and they did not like to sell chickens. And they would have to sell chickens. They would be delivered on the truck and go there, and then they'd have to call the farmer, or most generally it was farmers,
Sure.
to pick up the chickens that they were in. But I've said that I came almost as close learning more about chickens than I did about seeds.
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, you mentioned earlier to me something about when Earl May drove his car, or maybe it was Ed, must have been Earl. He always had his faithful companion along with.
Right.
Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, he had this dog, and the car was a Chevrolet, probably a 46, I guess. Then it was it was just more of a coupe,
Sure.
and there was a place up behind, and the dog would lay up on the back there. And when he'd drive in the parking lot, well, you could see him, and I think the dog got out, or he carried it into his office.
And do you remember her name?
I think it was
Dixie.
Dixie.
Yeah, that's it. That's
Yeah.
it. Well, Dixie is in a lot of the pictures that we have here in the museum.
Yeah.
Yes. And she looks like a real sweet little dog.
Yeah.
Well, I'll bet she got to go to the office quite a few times.
Oh, yeah, and I don't think anybody ever complained.
No, I'll bet not. I'll bet not. Well, Roland, do you have any other stories that you'd like to share with us? Anything from Henry Fields or Earl May?
I remember one, and I don't know how many years ago it's been, when we had a 10-inch rain. You probably were living in town then.
Mm-hmm.
And it rained and flooded down from in front of the store on the east side, and filled the basement full of water. And I went home to close the windows, and I happened to think my son, who was in college but was home for the summer, he worked for DeKalb.
Oh.
He he run a whole,
Detasseling?
no,
Oh.
they were, this is earlier than that, Jan. They were roguing the beans and stuff. And he was, so I thought, where in the world that he got his crew at? Because it was, it just got black and poured down. So I went to DeKalb, and I asked the lady there, I said, do you know where Rawls at? And she said, no, but his foreman's here. But she said, he'll run down and take a look. He said, I know where they're working.
Good.
So run down to the Coin Road and saw him, and he started back, he radioed back to the office, and he said they're on their way in. And they didn't get the rain down there.
Oh.
That's funny.
But Rawls said he brought the crew in because it was just black up here.
Now I remember it filled the basement.
Oh, yeah.
Yes. And then a bunch of you guys were down there because it seems to me that there was diesel fuel or something that had leaked down there, and the guys were scooping it out. And J.D. Rankin said, nope, all you men get out of there, it's too dangerous. Were you one of the men down in the
No.
basement?
No, I was probably on 4th floor.
Yeah. Oh, you were a smart one. There you go. There you go.
Yeah.
I know I'm certainly biased with Earl May, as my husband's been with him for 30 or 40 years here, but I always felt that there was a real family community with Earl May, and that they did their best for their employees.
Mhm.
Do you have any? I just remember Paul Foster and some of his stories of how Ed and Earl May especially helped him.
Oh, there was, I don't know, I've always said there's not many of us left in that worked there. And I hate to say this, but most of them are dead. guys that I worked with, you know.
Well, this is the 90th anniversary of the company.
Is
So,
that what it is?
Roland, I had a question about the Mayfair, in the Jubilee days.
Oh, yeah.
Do you have any memories of?
Oh, yeah.
Could you kind of tell about the Mayfair? I mean, what you remember or how it looked?
Yeah, you mean you're talking about the theater,
Yes.
Mayfair Theater?
Yeah. I
Yeah.
always heard there were stars. I always thought that was so cool. There were stars on the ceiling that would twinkle, and do you remember that?
Oh, yeah.
Uh-huh.
There was clouds. They had a cloud machine up there that would put clouds over the
Oh, really?
there, and then these lights would blink, and they're like stars.
And it was quite the place to go, wasn't it? I mean, from the pictures, it looks like it was beautiful.
Oh, it was.
Yeah.
Did
Yeah.
you and your family go there and watch the live entertainment and the radio shows?
Not so much the live ones, but we did go to see the movie. My wife and I, before we were married, we would go there. And see, there was a screen that dropped down, and that's for the movie. And then when the live showed, then they'd raise the screen up, and then the live show would be behind there. And it was a neat place. Yeah.
And how about the Jubilees? Do you remember those?
Oh, yeah. Henry Fields served hot dogs,
Okay.
and Earl May served pancakes.
Yeah.
I believe I got them
No,
right.
that's right.
But yeah, it was quite a deal. They'd bring people in from all over. I still have people. I remember coming up there, and we'd bring our tents, and a lot of them would go over to the rodeo, and then
Oh, so it was all kind of the same time, the rodeo and the Jubilee and all those things. Okay, I didn't know that.
And you know, I hadn't thought about it either. So were the Jubilee days then in August then? Is that the same time now that the rodeo's on?
yeah,
I have interest.
Huh.
Well,
Yeah.
you can see the pictures of Shenandoah, and there were just literally tens and 20s and 30,000 people lined up, and it's just phenomenal. And is all that from the KMA days, you know, the radio?
well,
everyone
and
listening?
I have to give Henry Fields credit
Sure.
for that too.
And I'm sorry, I didn't mean it quite that way.
Yeah.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
because of the radio talk
Yeah.
shows and.
Yeah.
And what was Henry Field's call numbers or call?
KFNF.
And they had those Jubilee days even in the 30s, right?
Oh, yeah.
Correct? How did, if money was so scarce, how did people afford to come? Especially from a distance,
I
maybe.
think it was just kind of like a vacation. That was their vacation.
Oh, for vacation.
And then they would come and buy what they needed to start a new year on.
And obviously they had free food.
Yeah, I always told this on the on the Mays family. I was on the road picking up seed racks that were in grocery stores, and I was in Newton, Iowa, and Maytag had went on strike, and I went in and picked up the seed rack, and I said, you know, I can't pay you. I said, well, the family I work for understand that you're in. He said, people here are losing their homes, losing their cars, losing everything because they're not getting any money. I said, Mr. May has said, when you go in and you pick up that rack, just don't hesitate to write them up for another year because we will take care of it.
He was well known for telling people to take
Yep.
the seed they needed and to pay him when they could.
Yep.
And I believe Henry Field did a lot of that too.
Oh, I think so. Now, they didn't pick up seed racks like we did. They didn't have the rack business. But, no, and we were down in Kansas, and I was picking up seed racks, and down, it was almost like a prairie, desert. And, some of these old boys would be sitting around, and I said, I didn't think it rained in Kansas. They said, get smart. Why, it rains here same as any place else. Where do you think all that drought came when people from Kansas went to Alaska to live because they couldn't live here? And I said, well, I'm sorry. I shouldn't have said it. But I said, I kind of thought it'd be fun in Kansas because we wouldn't have to worry about rain. It wouldn't be get wet. But I got ready and ended up left. But I learned you don't open your mouth.
We've all done that. Well, I have to say, I'm just back to the Jubilee days. It was a fascinating time. And I think I've read before, too, where, especially Earl May, but I'm sure everyone advertised this, that you were to come in the clothes you had. And I've read that before.
Is that
Yes,
right?
and that he said that, or Earl May said that he would be in his work clothes. So he expected that other people too. So I think, like Jan and both of you have hinted at, that they made it a vacation. They weren't expected to dress up. They came with their tents. They purchased their supplies. They got free hot dogs from Henry Field and pancakes at Earl May. I mean, this was a vacation.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and that was the big draw.
And I
And
hadn't
isn't
thought of
that
it that way.
isn't yeah?
Huh.
Mm-hmm.
I know my wife is from Red Oak, and her aunts and uncles and they would come down and spend a weekend
Sure.
down here.
Well, Roland, I think we'll finish up with just one last question. And you've probably already hinted at this, but what advice would you give young people today about the best way to make it through hard times?
Well, again, I think, and not just because Jan's here, but I really believe that they need to study and learn. My two grandsons just got back from Boston. Their dad and mom had to go back there on because they run a lumber yard here. They had to go back there to a show, and they took the kids, and I told them, I said, you guys, when you're back there, Boston, I've been there once, just be sure and look around, because you can go and come back and you'll see all that in your books. And they missed, I think, 4 days of school, but I think that they got that back with the 4 days they spent in Boston, because that's a neat, neat town, clean town.
Yep. Yeah. Well, Roland, I'm not a librarian, and I think that's very good advice. And on behalf of all of us, I'd like to thank you. You're wonderful to interview and very interesting. Thank you so much.